But unlike previous years where we've gone down a lot and just preview each team, we're going to do comparisons. We're going to compare the two teams that are closest to each other within a division. And those two teams in the AFC North, because that's what we're doing today, are the Ravens and the Bengals. Now, which one of these teams has a better chance to dethrone the Kansas City Chiefs this upcoming season?
You know how much I hate this question, because the answer is the Bengals. If we're talking about just who is going to dethrone the Chiefs, they've done it.
Bro, the last time the Ravens played the Chiefs, who won?
Yeah, shout out to Clyde for fumbling, for sure.
Sure was lit.
But because the question, like you said, we're not just doing, Ravens overview, Bengals overview, whatever. We're having topics within these little previews. And of course, Joel is going to go and say, who's going to dethrone the Chiefs? Because the Bengals already did it. They beat the Chiefs already to go to the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago. Joe Burrow always plays good against the Kansas City Chiefs. So the answer is the Bengals. And I don't want to make it that easy because the Ravens have a really good team. And last year, the Lamar, you had me beat. Burrow's got it. He got it last year. But, hey, Lamar's coming. He's not going to stop either. He's fully healthy. He got his bag. He got a new OC.
That's a fact.
He's got his weapons.
Talk to him.
So it's time you start. There's no arm Lamar. The back and forth between Lamar and, he's a great quarterback. No arm Lamar.
No, bro,
whatever.
That's the old one. It's come on, Lamar.
Come on, Lamar. So it's time for you, Joel, specifically to pick a damn side on Lamar. And the way I see this team shaping up, the way I see this offense shaping up, there's only one side to pick.
Dehls, I don't know where you've been recently. I've given Lamar Jackson his respect. Whenever we talk about the Ravens, I give them their respect. There's a reason why I'm the most unbiased analyst in the world.
Wow.
When we talk about the team that has the best chance
to
dethrone, it's self-titled.
Word.
There's a reason why I'm picking this team to dethrone the Chiefs, and it's because I'm unbiased. And it's the Cincinnati Bengals, baby. And you want to know why it's the Bengals? And the nerve of you. Me disrespecting Lamar, you've been disrespecting Joey B. He's been disrespecting Joey B.
Have we been disrespecting Joey B or been speaking truth about him? Oh, he's at worst a top 4 quarterback in the National Football League. At worst, that's disrespect allegedly. And we tell the truth about his playoff success, and we're apparently hating? When I say that he's had 2 good games in the playoffs.
5 wins in the playoffs.
Congratulations. Hey, I thought winning wasn't. No, bro. Winning isn't a quarterback stat.
Don't you do that.
Winning isn't a quarterback stat. Listen, I give him his credit against the Bills, and I give him his credit against KC last year. 2 seasons ago, I should say. But last year against the Kansas City Chiefs, he was mid. He was less than mid if we're being completely transparent. Against Tennessee, we had conversations about it. Evan McPherson was probably the MVP of that game. Joey B had a great throw to the sideline. No, he had a great throw to the sideline to Jamar Chase.
Wide open.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. He's not supposed to throw the ball?
No,
Is he supposed to hold on to the ball?
He threw for a lot of yards. I believe it was like 300, 350 around that. No touchdowns. The game against the Raiders. All right, game. How many touchdowns did he have there? Let's talk about the Super Bowl, right? Because his numbers got super inflated because of a Mickey Mouse 75-yard touchdown to T. Higgins.
That's a fact.
So I'm just here to tell the truth. Joe Burrow is great. He's amazing. He is a top 4 quarterback. But let's not talk about him like he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's all I want. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not hating. I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm trying to be, as he says, unbiased.
The game is about winning. And you may look at the stats.
Ironic.
You may look at the stats.
Isn't a quarterback stat. That's the only thing I just want to make sure that we're understood of.
You may look at the stats and be like, "Oh, the passer rating wasn't 100, so that's why he didn't have a great game."
You told me 90, and I won his low to 90. I was like, okay, let's see. He's got multiple games under 90.
You want to know
against the Kansas City Chiefs that he supposedly owns.
3-1 against them.
No doubt. But in the biggest game of the season, he crumbled.
Who's the greatest quarterback of all time?
Tom Brady. Probably. Most likely. Peyton Manning's got to be in that conversation.
Guess what his passer rating is in playoffs all time?
Let's just guess 94.
92.
89.8.
Okay.
Different era.
Which means that there are quarterbacks like Drew Brees, like Payne, that have better passer ratings than Brady. But ultimately,
who cares about
you'll
passer
remember
rating?
for
You're the one
your
that
moments.
asked me. You said, what was his passer rating in those games? I just gave him
And
to
when
you.
we talk about Joe Burrow versus Titans, most sack quarterback ever in a win. Quarterbacks that were sacked that many times in games before have all lost. He was sacked 9 times, still found a way to win the game. Versus the Raiders, still found a way to win the game. Versus the Chiefs, AFC Championship, found a way to win a game. Came back from double digits in that game to win the game.
That was legendary performance.
He did his thing. And this past season versus the Bills, in the snow,
elite.
Did his thing.
Elite.
He wasn't great against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship this past season versus Ravens.
Dude, what happened to the Ravens where he got saved?
Versus the Ravens.
By Hubbard, right?
He almost got it done.
How crazy is that?
Let's not give respect to Baltimore because they do a great job of disguising their coverages.
Baltimore,
Mike McDonald is one of the most innovative defensive play callers in the game. And sometimes we look at quarterbacks through the lens of, well, if you're not giving me 350 and 3 touchdowns, you didn't have a great game. A quarterback is supposed to control the tempo and give his team a chance to win. And you can say, while the Ravens may have limited Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense, they limited the offense.
20 points.
What you can say is that Joe Burrow didn't leave any play on the field missed. He didn't. He did exactly what the defense was giving him, and that's what the great quarterback does. Able to adjust. I look at the Bengals. They're 3-1 all time against Mahomes. They're 3-1 all time against Kansas City. Joe Burrow. Correct. More wins against him than any quarterback in the NFL. The Bengals have made back-to-back AFC Championship games, and the improvement and adjustment I saw from Cincinnati last season gave me more belief in this team moving forward. Last season, the Bengals started 2-3. There was panic, and the biggest reason for that was because defenses adjusted to their big play-relying offense by playing more too high. In week 1, the Steelers used too high 31% of the time. In week 2, the Cowboys used it 37% of the time. And Burrow through week 5 ranked 31st in air yards on early downs against too high, and the Bengals were the worst offense against too high coverage. Now, the reason why too high is so difficult to scheme up against is because defenses are able to play different coverages while having the same pre-snap look. When you start off with too high, that can be a cover 2. That can be a cover 4. But if a safety drops down post-snap, that can be a cover 1. That can be a cover 3. So we're talking about 4 different coverages disguised in one in a pre-snap look. And that's why it's so hard to go up against. But this is where the adjustment came. Post-week 5, Bengals were primarily a shotgun offense, number 1 in pass rate in the NFL, and had a 65% success rate against too high. Burrow targeted running backs twice as much as he did the year previously. He lowered his sack rate by half. Cut the sack rate down in half. His biggest weakness in 2021 became a strength of his in 2022. And Burrow finished number 1 in touchdowns against too high, despite being the worst quarterback against it through the first 5 weeks in the NFL.
The greats adjust.
And that type of quarterback maturation is why, to me, he's easily the second best quarterback in the league. This maturation put less pressure on the offensive line, which last year was still 30th in pass block win rate in the NFL. This offensive line wasn't anything to rave about, and it helped out the running game tremendously by seeing later boxes. And you know what speaks to Joe Burrow's greatness that much more?
What?
The Bengals use the lowest rate of play action and the second lowest rate of pre-snap motion, which means the Bengals were telling teams, we're not disguising our offense. You know what we're doing. You can't stop our receivers. And guess what? Joe Burrow is going to pick your ass apart every time. And that's exactly what he did. 39 touchdowns last year. Back-to-back years throwing 39 touchdowns. While the Bengals have lost key pieces,
unless you're talking
Von
about,
Bell,
are you counting
Jesse Bates.
Are you counting playoffs as well?
Just in total.
Okay. Oh, yeah. He had 4 rushing also. Impressive.
The Bengals lost Jesse Bates and Von Bell. I think those will be huge losses in the safety and the secondary. The offensive line improved by adding Orlando Brown. You now have Orlando Brown and Lyle Collins on opposite sides. That's a big upgrade from Jonah Williams. And Nick Scott is a solid replacement at safety. He's going to be playing primarily deep. When you have, as an elite of a trio, is Burrow, Chase, and T. Higgins, all on rookie contracts still, which means you're able to have a good roster and solid one around them. Lou Anarumo is still there, who I thought should have been a head coach. The Bengals are the most likely team to progress again this upcoming season because they have that continuity. The Ravens, I give them their respect. I do. But we have to see how this offense looks like. There's not going to be a big of an adjustment for the Bengals because they know what they're going to do. The only thing that's going to stop them is if the injury bug bites. That's it. But if they're healthy, I don't see any team being more of a threat to KC than the Bengals this upcoming season. I got the Bengals winning the AFC North once again.
Interesting. I thought we had conversations that you believe this was Baltimore's year.
I changed my mind on that.
Got it.
Because I look at Baltimore, and there's 3 reasons why I don't trust them. The defensive line is a major weak point. They had a 30% pressure rate last year against opposing quarterbacks, which was the 5th lowest rate. And the defensive line got worse. They lost a 9.5 sack guy in Justin Houston. You're counting on Tyus Bowser, Michael Pierce, Broderick Washington, Justin Matabuki, Owe, and David Ajabo. He's a wild card because he was a 3rd-round pick, so we'll see if he's going to contribute. But that's a wild card. There's no real standout player. And then the secondary, outside of Marlon Humphrey at corner, you're trusting a lot of average to below average guys. Rock Ya-Sin, Jalen Armour-Davis, Demarion Williams. And last year, the Ravens were 2-6 against teams with a winning record. And this year, Baltimore plays 12 games versus teams that had a winning record
How many of those games
last
without
season.
Lamar?
Some of them were, some of them weren't. Because they lost to the Giants, they lost to the Jaguars. So those were 2 losses right there. And I'm forgetting the other ones they lost to, but some were definitely without Lamar. There's no doubt. And this year, the defense is going to face the 3rd toughest schedule of offenses. And I think that I don't know if they're going to be up to the challenge. I believe in the Ravens offense this year. I think that Lamar is going to have his first 4,000 passing yard season. This is the best wide receiver talent he's ever played with. And it's a big jump from what you had in Greg Roman, who Greg Roman was running 21 and 22 personnel the majority of the time, which means there was like a lack of receivers on the field because they didn't trust any receivers. Listen, I respect what the Ravens have done this offseason, but the Bengals are just going to keep on elevating because that's what they've done every single year in the Joe Burrow era.
It's been proven that when Lamar Jackson's on the field, the Baltimore Ravens simply are a dominant football team. It's been proven that when Lamar Jackson's healthy, it is Lamar Jackson's division because both times that he's gone out, he has left number 1 in the division. Now, of course, it's been unfortunate that we've seen him injured, and of course, the Bengals have ultimately been able to overtake the Baltimore Ravens for the division both years. Now, the way I look at it is the Bengals secondary still does worry me. Do I believe in their front 7? For sure, but you have Awuzie, you have Mike Hilton. These are 2 guys that you can trust. Other than that, the loss of Jesse Bates is one that I'm not going to ignore. Their safeties definitely are in question. They did just draft one in Dax Hill. That's the concern if you are a Bengals fan, because you're not concerned about the offense, because you have Jamar Chase, you have T. Higgins. That's going to be successful regardless, of course. Joe Mixon this past season was probably the most, let me say, I don't want to say ineffective because, of course, statistically it was there, but what's the word I'm looking for, Joel? Because obviously you did tweet about it. What's the word I'm looking for? Inefficient. Thank you. That's the exact word that I was looking for. Yes, you did bring in Chase Brown. Chase Brown's one of those guys that you look at that could be sneaky. I 100% agree with your opinion on that. Give Joel a follow, Joel V. Moran. Now, why I look at Baltimore and why I am extremely intrigued at this is because now Lamar Jackson is supposedly 100% healthy. Yes, there is that concern that he can be injured. But now we have some weapons that we can have some fun with. And Mark Andrews isn't the only one drawing attention because last year we saw Mark Andrews be probably his most unproductive that we've seen him with in the NFL really since probably his rookie season. And that was primarily because now there was no more Hollywood Brown. There was really no outside threat. Rashad Bateman missed some time. He was obviously missed some time late in the season also. It was just a mess at the wide receiver skill position just as a whole. Dobbins came back towards the end. Looked all right, just looked a little bit hobbled, just looked like he was coming back from injury, and he was working himself through that. Also ended up having some good statistical games down the stretch, but he didn't look himself. Maybe we look towards year two and coming back for him to be a little bit more productive and a little bit more cleaner, especially with Lamar Jackson. But now we have Odell Beckham now in this wide receiver room. That's a little bit of a question just because he did just miss a year of football. Now Zay Flowers gets drafted. I know you love yourself some Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman, although he has struggled to stay healthy, He did play a good portion of his first year, and then, of course, last year he struggled with injury, but he should be back now and ready to go. Now Mark Andrews is not drawing doubles. He's not drawing the main attention of potentially a cornerback playing some defense. The field opens up for Mark Andrews. Now he becomes a threat again. We already mentioned it. Now he has an offensive coordinator that is going to be primarily predicated on improving Lamar Jackson's passing. We don't need to worry about his rushing. He can improvise. He's one of the best, arguably the best rushing quarterback in the history of this game. In the history of this game, yes, absolutely. The offensive line is really, really strong. I look at this defense. Yes, I agree with you. The front line's not the best. Michael Pierce, though, not a name to scoff at. Roquan Smith, one of the best linebackers in this game. That's really where their money is. That's where they're going to make a majority of the strength of this defense in that linebacking core. And then the safeties. You mentioned it already. You talked about their corners being a question, but of course, Marcus Williams is a great safety in this game, and Kyle Hamilton was extremely impressive as safety for his rookie season, ranked number 1 in PFF the safety position last season. So to me, I look at the Bengals. I understand that they are a great unit. I just understand when Lamar Jackson's on the field, it's their division. And you talked about health for the Bengals. Let's talk about health for the Ravens. It'll be theirs, and I think that they're probably the Chiefs' biggest threat, for the sole reason that I feel like you are going to see an improved Lamar Jackson in the passing game, and that's really why that's the separator between the two for me.
And we talked about their defense a lot. Last year, while they got Roquan at the end, it definitely improved. No doubt. But it wasn't always because they had one dominant unit, right? I know you're a big fan of EPA. Their rush EPA was 11th. Their dropback EPA was 22nd. So it's not like either of those units were really dominant. Where they were dominant was in the red zone. Only 48% of their drives that ended up in the Ravens' end zone ended up being touchdowns, which was 4th in the NFL, which led to them having a top 3 scoring defense. So they've allowed yards, specifically last season, between the 20s. But once they get to that red zone, they have a really good job of holding teams to 3 points instead of 7. So I know on paper, maybe their defense doesn't look like it has all the all-pros outside of a couple of guys, but I think that really comes where coaching comes into play.
And I'm glad you mentioned some stats because I almost forgot to share some. Of course, talking about their defense, in the last 6 weeks of the season, the Ravens defensive unit ranked 5th in yards per play, 3rd in DVOA, and 2nd in EPA per play. Opponents only averaged 192 pass yards with a 4 touchdown to 3 interception ratio and 3.8 yards per carry. This defensive unit was elite towards the second half of the season, and I only look for this unit to continue that success.
And I like how all of the receivers complement each other, right? Rashad Bateman showed in his first 2 seasons he could win over the top. He has the game-breaking speed, but he could also win underneath. You have Zay Flowers, who ran in the 4.4, 4.42. He's a bit smaller, but he's someone who get over the top. He showed that in his college tape. And then you have Odell, who could kind of do it all. Now, all of these guys have their own question marks. Odell and Rashad Bateman with injury concerns. Zay Flowers, rookie year, a bit undersized at 5'9". But I think Todd Monken coming in from Georgia, and not to disrespect Greg Roman, but his offense is run-based, right? He's not out there really doing anything that over the top in terms of passing the ball. But I think Todd Monken coming in could almost unlock a new level to this offense. You mentioned it. You think this could be Lamar's first season throwing for 4,000 plus rushing passing yards. So I'm looking really at those 3 receivers. But another guy that could be a sleeper on this team, we might talk about a little bit later, is Isaiah Likely, who we know Mark Andrews, the tight end one on this team. He's going to get a majority of the snaps. But I still believe the Ravens are going to put out their best players on the field. And one of their best players is going to be Isaiah Likely. He didn't get a ton of opportunity last year. He only had 3 games of 50% or more snaps. But in 2 of those games, week 8 against Tampa, which I think Mark Andrews missed, 6 receptions, 77 yards and a touchdown. And week 18, where Mark Andrews didn't play, 8 catches for 103 yards. He's 6'4", so a bit undersized for a tight end, but 6'4", around 240. He's athletic. He's going to get on the field, and he's going to get a lot of looks. And it's definitely another weapon because all the receivers are just a bit smaller. Odell, Bateman, none of these guys are huge outside of Mark Andrews. So I'm looking at him as someone who could also kind of reshape this offense.
And I mentioned Dax Hill being the one that was drafted and made a mistake. I was talking about DJ Battle, who they recently just drafted. Dax Hill the year before.
Yeah,
Dax Hill,
he was drafted last year. So
allegedly, he's supposed to be the starter for this upcoming season, though. That'll be interesting to see, of course, because you lose Jesse Bates. That's one of the leaders of that defense. That's going to be an adjustment period.
I think the Bengals have done a great job preparing for departures. Dax Hill, first-round pick last year.
Yep.
They drafted Miles Murphy, edge rusher out of Clemson, in the first round this past draft.
Boy.
And the defensive line, we know Trey Hendrickson is a mainstay, but Sam Hubbard, they could lose next season. So they're doing a great job at finding players in the draft and filling those positional value needs for eventual departures. Now, listen, the Ravens defense, when they acquired Roquan Smith, was elite. It was nothing short of elite. And I think early on in the season, we saw Mike McDonald tinker with a lot of disguises, and that's why we saw a lot of busted coverages early on in the season. The game that comes to mind is the game against Miami, where they let up 3 to 4 busted coverages, and they let the Dolphins come back. Throughout the season, the Ravens played more discipline. But I firmly believe that the difference maker for the Ravens this season, if they're going to win the division, is going to be their offense.
Agreed.
I think Lamar Jackson has a chance to have the best season of his career. And
MVP.
that's saying something, because he was the 2019 unanimous MVP.
He was OD.
But listen, this is the best wide receiver talent Lamar Jackson has ever played with.
By far.
J.K. Dobbins, if he stays healthy, can have a top 10 running back season, if not higher. He's that great. He averages about 5+ yards per carry.
That's
on his career.
Yeah, and it's also predicated on the fact that whoever is the starting running back for the Baltimore
Gus
Ravens
Edwards also averages 5 yards per carry.
they're going to have success.
Yeah.
And the offensive line is a top 5 unit in football. Now, last season, this is a eye-opening, eye-popping number in a negative way. The Ravens used 11 personnel, which means that they had 3 wide receivers or more on the field, 12% of their offensive plays.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
The NFL's average use of 11 personnel last season was 61%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In the last 10 years, no other team has used 11 personnel 20% or less of the time. The Ravens' use of 3 wide receivers on the field was historically low, and that's because they don't have wide receivers they can trust. Most of the personnel groupings were 22 and 21 personnel, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. But Greg Roman used these personnel groupings because the wide receiver talent was not there. Since 2018, the most snaps of wide receiver for the Ravens, Willie Snead in 2018, Willie Snead in 2019, Hollywood Brown in 2020 and 2021, and this past season, it was Demarcus Robinson. And they have been 31st
Shout out to John, man.
in wide receiver spending since 2019. And the wide receivers they've went out and got have been Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, Des Bryant, Deshaun Jackson, and during the middle of the season. So they haven't done a great job at surrounding Lamar with talent to use 11 personnel groupings. But this year, Todd Monken, it's going to be spread. It's going to be 11 personnel. They're going to abuse it. And teams within the division in the AFC North are below average against 11 personnel when they face that offensively. So that can be something that the Ravens have an advantage on. And that's why I think that Lamar Jackson is going to have the best passing season of his career. I think it's going to be 4,000 yards. I think it's going to be 30 touchdowns. The only thing that can hold him back is injury. The last 2 seasons, his injuries have been in the pocket. They have not been on rushes. Yep. So that's the only thing that can hold him back. But the offense is what I look at, and I think can be game-changing. The defense, we know what it's going to be. It's going to be steady, if anything. At worst, it's going to be steady. It's going to be an average unit. I think they'll be a great unit. But really, it's this offense that I'm looking at, and I think if Lamar Jackson truly has his best passing season, he's going to be in contention for MVP next year.
Don't forget, when he was healthy last year, 8-3, not number 1 in the division, but number 1 in the AFC before he went down to injury.
But ultimately, it's still the Bengals to lose.
It's not.
Well, when you're talking specifically about the Chiefs, who's dethroning,
Yeah, that's fair.
3-1 against
He
Mahomes
knew
is
how he
nuts.
was predicated.
Yes,
the
I know.
But that's why I ignored it.
Yeah.
I ignored it.
We're not
Because of course
answering the
no.
So you don't
We're-
have the Bengals winning the AFC North.
I
I don't want to spoil it. We're not doing our predictions yet.
Oh, I understand. It's a little.
I'm here for
spoil.
spoiling.
It's a
The
little,
answer's no.
little
You go 1
sprinkle.
to 5, not 5 to 1. I bet.
It's 4-1 actually, because there's only 14.
Well,
in
I
the
was just
division.
talking about top 5s.
Bozo. That's come on. You know that's not true. You know that's not true.
You say you love spoiling.
Well, just for today.
Listen, Dehls, last year you picked the Ravens. You almost thought you got me. And
Stay healthy.
in the first 5 weeks,
It's unfair.
I remember after week
Oh,
1,
after week 1, I was in my bag.
when
It was
Joe
late.
Burrow threw 3 interceptions, or I think it was 4.
I knew that was my only chance. I'll be honest. I knew Burrow was gonna do that all year.
Oh my goodness, you were so excited, but then Joey B came out of nowhere. Listen,
A
Came
loss
out of
for the
nowhere.
Ravens. A loss for the Ravens too. Ben Powers. That's a big loss.
yeah, Joe Burrow is still, to me, the second best quarterback in the NFL.
Where'd you
The
have
way
Lamar?
he processes
Where'd you have Lamar? 'Cause you just
Lamar
dropped
is
your QB
6'7". Lamar 6'7" for me.
Joe Burrow.
The way
man.
Joe Burrow processes
Number
the
2.
field,
This is so crazy.
the way he processes the game. Listen, he doesn't have phenomenal, exceptional arm strength, but all of his weaknesses he's cleaned up from last season.
Agreed.
And this offensive line, I think, got a tad bit better. We'll see how it looks. Because last year they still were a below average unit, one of the worst units in football on pass block win rate. But this year, with Joe Burrow improving in sack rate, Joe Burrow improving against too high, being one of the best quarterbacks against it, it's not even going to matter if Joe Mixon's inefficient, because he can be inefficient all he wants. But ultimately, Joe Burrow's going to carry this offense, and he's going to make it a top unit in the league. And that's why, I just got the Bengals winning division.
They also want Joe Mixon to take a pay cut, and reportedly Joe Mixon doesn't want to take a pay cut. It seems unlikely that he gets cut because they're a team trying to win a championship, and Joe Mixon's still the best running back on this roster. And Samaje Perine, who was their third down back last year, is on Denver now, brought in Chase Brown, as you mentioned, or maybe Drew mentioned. But I don't think they'll be able to get away with Chase Brown as their only running back, so I'm still expecting Mixon on the team. Yeah,
I think Mixon will have a big workload early on. Yeah. I am expecting Chase Brown to take over, though. I think he will take over.